The mercy of the powers aside, experiencing again and again the emotions coupled with memory would leave an entity no time for the emotions of the present moment. And then there is the matter of pain. But Dairine was caught in a situation the manual had never envisioned, a human being having her life totally experienced and analyzed by another form of life quite able to examine and sustain every moment of that life in perfect recall. With the motherboard, Dairine fell down into the dim twilight before her birth, heard echoes of voices, tasted for the first time the thumb it took her parents 5 years to get out of her mouth, lay blinking at a bright world, came to understand light and form, fought with gravity, and won, walking for the first time, smiled on purpose for the first time at the tall, warm shape that held her close and said loving things to her without using sound, found out about words, especially no, ecstatic, delighted, read for the first time, saw her sister in tears, and felt for the first time a kind of pain that didn't involve falling down and skinning your knees. Pain. There was enough of it. Frustration, rage at a world that wouldn't do what she wanted, fear at all kinds of things that she didn't understand, fear of things she heard on the news at night, a world full of bombs that can kill everything, full of people hungry, people shooting at each other and hating each other, hearing her parents shouting downstairs while she huddled under the covers, feeling like the world was going to end. Will they shoot each other now? Will they have a divorce? Finding out that her best friend was telling other kids stories about how she was weird and laughing at her behind her back. Finding that she was alone in the world, making new friends, but by force, by cleverness and doing things to make herself popular, not because the friends came to her naturally. Making herself slightly feared so that people would leave her alone to do the things she wanted to without being hassled. Beating her fists against the walls of life, knowing that there was more, but she couldn't figure out what it was. Then finding out that someone knew the secret. Wizardry. And it didn't come fast enough. It never comes fast enough. Nothing ever does. And now the price was going to be paid for that, because she didn't know enough to save these lovely, glassy creatures, her buddies, that she watched be born, helped be born, her children, sort of. She didn't know how to save them, and they were going to be dead. Everything was going to be dead. Pain. It hurts too much, Dairine thought, lying there listening to her heartbeat slowly begin to die away. It hurts. I didn't want them to get hurt. But it was part of the data, and it was too late now. The motherboard had it, and all the mobiles would have it too the second she released Dairine. Why should they care about slow life now, she thought in anguish and shame at the bitter outrush of what her life had been. Cruelty, pettiness, selfishness almost incredible. But too late now. The motherboard was saving the last and newest of the data to permanent memory. Any minute now the mobiles would start the program running, and entropy would freeze, and life would stop being a word that had a meaning. The last nanosecond crawled by. Echoes of the save rolled in the link. Nothing ever comes fast enough. End of file. Dairine lay still and waited for it all to end. And lightning struck her. The flow of data reversed. She would have screamed, but trapped in the quick life time of the motherboard, everything happened before the molasses-slow sparks of bioelectricity even had time to jump the motor synapses on the beginning of their journey down her nerves. The motherboard was pouring data into her as it had poured it into the mobiles under Dairine's tutelage, but not the mercifully condensed version of the manual programming that it had given them. The whole manual. The entire contents of the software, which in book form can be as small as a paperback or larger than a shelf full of telephone books. It poured into her, and she couldn't resist, only look on in a kind of fascinated horror as it filled her, and never overflowed, just filled and filled. The dinosaurs could have died while it filled her. Life could have arisen on 100 worlds and died of boredom in the time it took to fill her. She forgot who and what she was, forgot everything but this filling, filling, and the pain it cost her, like swallowing a star and being burned away by it from the inside while eternally growing new layers on the outside. And finally, not even the pain made sense anymore. She lay there on her side and stared at the ground and was astonished not to see the crumbs from her sandwich in front of her nose. She could not move or speak, and she could just barely think with great pain and effort. There was something wrong with the way time was flowing, except that every time she tried to think what it was exactly, the time flow seemed perfectly all right. Shapes were moving in front of her, and voices were speaking, either in vast, soft drawls or in light, singing voices that seemed familiar. Slowly, names attached themselves to the voices. "Now we see what these heart things she gave us are for." That was Geigo. "Good kid," she thought weakly. "Good baby. You tell him." "And what entropy does and what it cannot touch. Ever." That was Beanpole, the silly-looking thing. Where did he get such a voice? "Not all the evils and deaths it makes possible can touch the joys that run through it. We will have those, too." "We will not stop that joy," said Monitor. "Not for a nanosecond." "It may be slow," said one of the mobiles, one whose name Dairine couldn't remember, "but it is life, and it brought us life. We do nothing to harm that." "And if you are against that," said Geigo, "your programming is in error, and we are against you." They all sounded more complete than they had. The one voice she did not hear was Logo's, but she did hear something stranger, a murmur of astonishment that went up from the thousands of mobiles. And was there a trace of fear in it? She couldn't move, couldn't see what was happening. "Your choice," said another voice. At the sound of it, Dairine struggled with all her might to move, and managed to do no more than lever herself up half an inch or so, and then flop down flat again, limp as a filleted fish. "Enjoy it. You will make no more choices. But first, to pay for the one you have made, you will watch what the entropy you love so much will do to her." Dairine lay still, waiting for the lightning to strike. And another voice spoke. "Wanna bet?" it said. "It didn't feel us arrive right when we did," Nita thought. "How distracted it is! What's she been doing to it?" She and Kit had actually had a second to collect themselves when they appeared, and Nita had looked around her in a hurry. Another barren world, a great flaming, barrel-spiraled galaxy flung across its night, an old tired star high in the sky, type N or S from the look of it, and a crowd of robots crowded around Dairine and looking at her and them and the lone one. As with any other of the powers, though there will be general similarities of vision among the like-minded, no two people ever see the lone one in exactly the same way. Nita saw the good-looking young red-haired man she had seen in a skyscraper in the alternate otherworld the lone one called its own. He was not wearing the three-piece suit he had affected there. Now he was dark-clad and dark-cloaked, unarmed and needing no armor. A feeling of cold and power flowed from him and ran impossibly along the ground as if carried on a chill air. As the sight sank in, Nita shook like a leaf. What Kit might see, what Dairine and the robots might be seeing, Nita wondered briefly, then put the thought aside. She had other business. It turned and looked at them. Nita stood as straight as she could under the circumstances, her manual in one hand, the other hand clutching the gimbal in her pocket. Beside her, Kit stood almost the same way, except that Pichu sat on his wrist, making him look like a king's falconer. "Fairest and fallen," Nita said. "Greeting and defiance." It was the oldest courtesy of wizards, and the most dangerous, that line. One might be intending to cripple or destroy that power, but there was no need to be rude about it. "You too," said the lone one. "And a pet for company. Adorable. And well met. You are off your own ground and well away from help at last. It took me long enough to set up this trap, but it was worth it." Kit glanced at Nita and opened his mouth, but Pichu beat him to it. "And that's all you're going to get out of it," Peach said, "since the real prize you hoped to catch in that trap has obviously slipped out of it." Peach began to laugh. "You never learn, do you? You're not the only one who can structure the future. The other powers will sometimes scruple to do it. Not often, but they took a special interest in this case. The first time you've completely lost a choice from the beginning." "And the last," said the lone one. It made an angry, sweeping gesture at them, but Nita had been waiting for something of the kind. She clenched her hand on the gimbal and thought the last syllable of the spell she had been holding ready. The bolt that hit their shields was like lightning, but more vehement and dark. It was meant to smash the shield like a rock thrown at an egg, leaving them naked to the quick, horrid death of explosive decompression. But it bounced. No shock was transmitted to them directly, but Nita, fueling the spell directly, felt the jolt go through her as if that thrown rock had hit her right in the head. She staggered. Kit steadied her. The lone one looked at them in cold astonishment. "Hate won't be enough this time," Nita said. "Care to try a nuke?" It didn't move, but that cold, fierce force struck the shield again, harder. Dust and fragments of the surface flew all around them, and the ground shook. When the dust settled, it was plain that the shield spell produced a spherical effect, because through the bottom of the sphere they could see the molten stuff underneath them pressing against it. They were standing in a small crater that seethed and smoked. Nita sagged against Kit. This time he had to hold her up for a moment. "Why are we alive?" he said in her ear. "The gimbal's not enough to be holding that off. What are you fueling that shield with?" "A year of my life per shot," she said, giddy. Kit stared at her. "Are you out of your mind? Suppose you were scheduled to be hit by a truck in 3 years or something." She shrugged. "I better watch where I cross the street, that's all. Kit, heads up. There's more important stuff to think about." "Yes, indeed," Pichu said to the lone one. "The last time you lose a choice, let your own words ordain the truth, as usual." Its face got so cold that Nita for a moment wondered whether the shield was leaking. Impossible, she thought. But enough of that, and enough sitting around and waiting for it to do stuff. "I'm warning you now," she said. "I don't know what you've been up to here, but I bet you're the reason my sister's lying there on the ground. I don't want to hurt you, particularly. You hurt enough as it is. But I'm giving you just one chance to get out of here." She thought she had seen rage before, but evidently the lone power did not care for being pitied. "Or you will do what?" "This," Nita said, and dropped the gimbal on the ground, knowing what would happen to it, and let loose the other spell she had been preparing, the other one Kit would not have liked to hear about. The one word she spoke to turn it loose struck her down to her knees as it went out of her. The figure of the lone one writhed and twisted as something odd happened to the light and space around it. Then it was gone, and the gimbal fell to powder, which sifted into a little pile on the ground. Kit shook Pichu off and reached down frantically to grab Nita. "What did you do?" She panted for breath. "Sent it home," she said. "We know the coordinates for its dimension. It's a world gate, like the one Dairine did for Mars." "That's 2 years of your life, maybe 5, Kit said, furious, dragging her to her feet. "Why don't you tell me this crap when you're planning it?" "You'd get mad. You're mad now." "We could have shared the time, you stupid—" "Never mind. It's gone. Let's get Dairine and haul out of here before it—" Whatever hit them, hit them from behind.